All right. The Oilers. I understand that the NHL officially announced their expansion to Vegas. No surprise to anybody who watches my channel, is it? Because I called it. Because they called it. And the people I listen to are usually Elliot Friedman and Bob McKenzie and Darren Drager. Those are the three. Anybody else starts spouting off what they think is going to happen, I tune out. I don't pay attention. Now, the Oilers, it's tough. I looked at, and somebody made a comment on yesterday's video about how 7 out of 9 scouts wanted Ryan Murray instead of Nail Yakupov. I remember that. I do. And in the end, management made the wrong call. And I looked at who they drafted and who they could have drafted. And the thing is, you can get into that game with everybody, but the two that stick out are Ryan Murray should have been drafted, and the Taylor versus Tyler, they picked the wrong guy. Taylor Hall plays a very entertaining game, and he's a great goal scorer. Tyler Seguin is one of the best players in hockey. And I don't know if he would have been happy in Edmonton. He seems to be his maturity was brought into question in Boston, and he definitely seems to enjoy that partying lifestyle. But I tell you, even if the Oilers had stayed near the bottom of the league and somehow won the lottery, just imagine Connor McDavid and Tyler Seguin. Scary. But what they've got is and I understand, and somebody made the comment that their blue line depth is good, and that's fine. But really, in order to make the next step, they need a solid top four, and they don't have it. Griffin Reinhart, when he was picked up from the Islanders, I expected him to play most of the season in Edmonton, and then it didn't happen. And now there's a lot of rumors about how certain fans feel about him and whether or not he has the desire and the ability to be an NHL defenseman, which is too bad because Griffin Reinhart, being the son of my favorite defenseman, Paul Reinhart, it's a shame. I had really high hopes that all of his kids would just have this fantastic career. Max is buried in the American League. Griffin appears to be buried in the American League. Sam, of course, is future star for Buffalo. Wow. It is hard. It is not easy to be an NHLer. And for the Oilers, they have some tough decisions to make. Jordan Eberle is very popular in Edmonton. And I understand Oilers fans would rather trade Yakupov. Yakupov's trade value right now is low. It's like when they traded away Puyarvi, and they didn't get a lot for Puyarvi because his trade value was low. And in order for them to make dramatic moves here, they're going to want to look at trading that draft pick, even though Tkachuk in an Oilers jersey, that could change everything. If his talent in the Ontario League translates to the NHL, I don't see how the Oilers pass on him. I really don't. Even Dubois. I mean, if they can come up with a deal for Nugent Hopkins, let's say somebody comes in and says, "Hey, look, we want Ryan Nugent Hopkins, and we're willing to give you, a top 2 defenseman for him." Do you draft Dubois then? Because he can. I know he's being projected as a center, but he can play wing. And I think what gets lost sometimes when you look at the Oilers, because it's all McDavid and Nugent Hopkins, and then they talk about Yakupov, and then you've got Eberle. Draisaitl. Draisaitl looked good last year, and he's kind of a keeper. So for the Oilers right now, they're in a position where they have to take some of this offensive depth and trade it so they can get more depth on the blue line. Blue line depth is going to be expensive. Goligoski gets a $27 million, I think it's 27 or 29 million 5-year deal from Phoenix. For Goligoski to set the market at $5.5 million for a middle of the road top 4 defenseman. He's not bad. He's not great. I think that shows that the prices are probably going to be really high. Demers probably gets $5 million a year. I know he's looking for $5.5 million. He'll probably get $5 million. He's not worth it. And it's the sky's the limit for some of these guys once July 1st rolls around. Now, there weren't any, big deals today. There weren't any big moves of any sort. Things got kind of quiet, and I think it's the Vegas thing. And as much as I want to just sit here and Oilers, there's not a lot to talk about with the Oilers. Because with the Oilers, it's McDavid. If Connor McDavid can play 70 games next year and be healthy, they're in the running for the playoffs. With Cam Talbot in net, he is adequate enough to win enough games that you're in the conversation. And at this point, Edmonton just being in the conversation for the playoffs would be a huge relief to their fans. But today is dominated by expansion. And for a team like the Oilers, expansion is going to be fine. Because you've got a lot of young players. You've got a lot of prospects. The guys that the Oilers will leave exposed will not be the desirables. And I don't believe they're rife with no movement clauses. So Edmonton's in pretty good shape. If I was the GM of the Oilers, I'd keep the number 4 draft pick, unless somebody really knocks my socks off. Maybe Montreal comes in, offers me their draft pick, and some defenseman, not Jeff Petrie, because he's been in Edmonton before. If Bolya and a number 9 draft pick are offered, I take it. But if Montreal makes that offer, they're crazy. So it's tricky. The big name, Subban's on apparently can be had for the right price. The Canadians would be crazy to trade him, but they've been crazy before. Remember when they traded for Scott Gomez and traded Ryan McDonough to get him? Yeah, that's still a head scratcher. It's a pretty big head scratcher. The other head scratcher for me, in terms of stuff I've been reading, is Ben Bishop. The Tampa Bay Lightning are close. They are close to being a Stanley Cup contender. They are close to being perennial contenders. Vasilevsky looked okay when Bishop was out, but he wasn't Bishop. If Bishop had played the entire series against Pittsburgh, who knows? Who knows what might have happened? Maybe Tampa. Maybe this would have been the jersey of the Stanley Cup champions. There's no way to tell. We won't know. And I just can't see Bishop going anywhere. The one thing I've heard, and I heard this on Tim and Sid, is the idea of teams being able to negotiate with Vegas before the expansion draft. Meaning you can go to the GM of the Las Vegas Double Downs or Las Vegas Blackjacks or whatever they're going to call themselves and say, okay, if you'll leave Bishop alone, we'll give you a second rounder. And after the expansion draft, we can talk about who else you might want if you leave Bishop alone. And maybe Vegas takes that. I don't know that I like that stipulation, I find that odd. I remember players being parked on different rosters to try to get around the expansion draft. Dominik Hasek was the most obvious park job that belonged to the Winnipeg Jets for about 6 hours. It's baffling. Really, really baffling. But, yeah, expansion is the big news of the day. And as much as I would love to talk about the Oilers, honestly, and they're losing Ferentz, which is fine because Andrew Ferentz was pretty much done after 2012. 2011, he was solid in the Bruins run. And he was always one of those defensemen that I was kind of, I don't know if I like you or not. Every time I watch a game, sometimes he'd make plays and I go, wow, that's great. And the next game would be like, I don't know what game he's playing, but he's really hurting the team. I'm not even sure he knows which way he's supposed to be going with the puck because he's going the wrong way. But where Edmonton's going to run into problems is because they're an undesired city for free agents. Because when the big names become available, they're going to be looking for sunny southern destinations or major Canadian locations like Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver. Those will be the big three. Edmonton loses out, so they end up having to overpay role players to come in as free agents. They kind of have to overpay their kids to stay. And I think that's what's happened with Eberle and Nugent Hopkins. I think they've been overpaid so they don't leave as restricted free agents at the end of their contracts. They make a lot of money, and the Oilers are not shy about spending money. But the question becomes, if they're spending all this money and they're not getting any closer to making the playoffs, is it smart money? And I don't think it is. I think, and this is a problem I have with Vancouver, and people have said, oh, well, we'll always be a cap team. But why? Why, if you look at the standings and your team's near the bottom, why should your team be near the top in terms of how much they're getting paid? They shouldn't be. And then, when people say, oh, well, there's no reason to play rookies and we'll just keep this guy and that guy in. If the rookie belongs, he can stay. But at the same time, Edmonton's an example of how rushing rookies and having all these young guys play together can cause a lot of losing to happen. It can cause fragile egos. I will say this. The Oilers last year were the best coached I've seen them in a while. And they're close. Like I said, if Connor McDavid plays most of the games this year, I'm not even saying every game, just if he plays 70 games, I think they would win enough of those 70 games to be in the running for the playoffs. It is exceedingly difficult to make the playoffs in the West. And it's going to get more difficult when Las Vegas comes in. Because the NHL doesn't just want an expansion team. They want a competitive expansion team. They want Vegas to put up the kind of record that Florida did its first year. Or I got Minnesota, and Minnesota had a good first year. Columbus wasn't bad its first year. They want a good team. They don't want Vegas to be fodder for the league for the first 4 years. The league, there's 30 GMs right now that are trying to figure out a way to screw Vegas in its first year that don't want Vegas. And I would imagine for, expansion teams from the 90s and from 2000, if the rules are that much better for Vegas, on some level they have to resent that. Like, look, Atlanta had garbage. Atlanta, its first year, had absolutely horrible luck in terms of who they got. And it was a terrible team. Just awful. Nashville was lucky, and Minnesota and Columbus were able to make it work. But man, Atlanta, it was brutal. So the NHL doesn't want that again. They don't want to have an expansion team come in and play, have terrible players and just set up the whole franchise for losing. because that's how you end up with the team getting transplanted to Canada, like the Thrashers moving to Winnipeg. And this is supposed to be a video about the Oilers. It's difficult. It really is. There's a reason I started with Winnipeg. Winnipeg was easy because Winnipeg is a team that has bothered me for years because they're still the Thrashers. Ottawa has bothered me for years because of their ownership. Because they tend to do this in the standings and they just can't maintain any level of success. But I'm very passionate about my dislike for the Oilers most of the time. That's waned a little bit the last couple years. Who knows? Maybe it's because I'm getting older. But I like McDavid, and I like what Chiarelli's trying to do. I know Chiarelli being GM there helps because I was really upset when the Bruins got rid of him. Apparently, he had problems with Cam Neely and Jeremy Jacobs. But seriously, Chiarelli got Boston to the Stanley Cup. And while some of his moves have been questionable in Edmonton, and Griffin Reinhart being one of them, he has an innate ability to turn a team around. And I think he will. I think he will in Edmonton. I think they have competent goaltending up front. They're scary. If McDavid's in that lineup, they're scary. If they keep that draft pick and they draft Tkachuk, that's scary too. And the blue line will get help because one of the big names up front is going to get moved. If Yakupov gets moved, they might get a number 4 defenseman. If Eberle gets moved, they'll get a number 2 defenseman. But that's what they need. And it's tricky. Somebody said on one of my videos, the Canucks have never had a number 1 defenseman. That's true. Closest I can think is Jovanovski. Jovanovski, Lidster in his heyday, and Lume, I guess. Although Lume never took the shots he should have. Salo could have been the guy if he'd been healthy. Oland had stretches, but never really was that go-to guy. And in Edmonton's case, they haven't really had that dynamic defenseman. And I'm going to back away here. Since Chris Pronger got traded. I'm sorry. Very sorry. Because that's what did it. The Chris Pronger trade was bad for the Oilers, and they were up against the wall because that's where Pronger and apparently Pronger's wife set him. And then Pronger went on to win a Stanley Cup in Anaheim. But they haven't had that guy since then. Justin Schultz, when he was signed as a free agent, I think they envisioned he could eventually be that guy. He got traded because he's not that guy. And they don't really have a guy in their prospects or their lineup at all. That you say this could be it. Darnell Nurse should be a top 4 guy. I don't know if he's going to be top 2. And then the rest of them, you have adequate, decent guys. But it's like out here in Vancouver, where you have Biega, and you have Padan, and you have all these guys that Canucks fans are affectionate towards, and they like them. But in order to reach like elite level defense, you have to let go of the fact you just like these guys, and you have to get really, really good players. And that's what Edmonton needs on the blue line. And they really don't have that right now. They have some good guys, great guys. And I hope I'm wrong, but that could be what keeps them down and makes them a lottery team again next year. They could very well be back in that lottery next year. They could be drafting 5th or 6th overall. Because while I think they've made some strides and they shouldn't be worst in the league, they could still be close. So, anyways, that's my Oilers almost expansion-ish type video. But Edmonton fans, rejoice in Connor McDavid because I think he will be the best player since Crosby, and I think his potential is unlimited. I think he's that good. So you have that, and as long as you have that superstar, then it's a question of building around him. And when you have a superstar like McDavid, maybe then free agents will want to come. Maybe a top 6 forward takes a look and goes, man, I can put up a lot of points playing on the wing for McDavid. And then I can use those points towards my next contract. It happens. So maybe Edmonton's fortunes are going to turn around. I don't see them finishing last. Again, I don't see them finishing in the playoffs. But, yeah, again, they should be in the mix, at least till the All-Star game. They seem like they'll probably be in the mix till around the All-Star game, and then maybe they fall off. It's hard to tell because it's a very young team. And it's also hard to tell because their lineup right now is incomplete. Once we get closer to the start of next season, then we can talk about whether they're on the right track or they're just killing time until whatever happens. So anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll post another video later about something, again, hockey related, but not the Oilers.